What is up, everyone? Welcome to the Daily Fix Fantasy and Frames Daily Fantasy Podcast. I am your host, Keith Fleming. With me, as always, my co-host with his beard looking extra good today. Takeaway points from wearing a Minnesota Twins hat. Joe, I root for a bunch of different teams, the Brain Mats. What's going on, Joe?
Just reminiscing on the 1991 World Series right now.
Screw you, Joe. How dare you? How dare you? We're going to have some fun today. For those that have been following us the last couple of weeks, we've been doing best ball stuff. And I keep telling my friends that I think best ball should be more popular than it is, because one of the pains of fantasy football is it's a lot. And I mean, if you're not really following stuff, or, depending on the settings for waiver wire at your computer, the second something happens, it's tough. And with best ball, you draft your team and you're done, and you can still talk smack. You can still go head to head. There's a ton of different, ways they can do out the season, but it's a lot of fun. It's different too, because you have to look at, obviously you want guys that are consistent in early rounds, but then as it gets later, you're looking for guys that, are going to have big weeks or, come on strong at the end of the season. So it's something I think everybody should look into. Well, we did a mock draft this last week, and I've got two of the guys from Fantasy and Frames here to help us discuss it. Let's start with the noob, Charlie Candelosa. Did I say that right?
Candelosa, but it's fine.
It took 2 seconds. I already butchered it. Okay. He is a new writer for Fantasy and Frames. He's been doing some great work on the Dynasty targets, the Devontae Smith, Cole Kmet. I've enjoyed reading both of those. Charlie, welcome. How you doing?
I'm doing good, man. I'm happy to be here. Thank you guys for inviting me to the mock draft. That was pretty awesome, and I'm happy to be on the show.
Absolutely. And then we should be very honored to have the man, the myth. No, don't. This is both what's great and annoying about Nate Markham. He's the IDP director of content and senior writer for Fantasy and Frames, and he is a legit Fantasy Pro expert ranker. And I know a lot of people can have that tag of, Fantasy Pro expert ranker, but not many people can say they were top 5 in all of IDP last year. Nate's one of the smartest minds in fantasy football and a great dude. Nate, really appreciate you being on here.
Man, that's very, very kind of you. As lucky as the Twins were in 91 and in 87. Fun fact, Gary Gaetti, famous Minnesota Twins, grew up in my hometown, and nice. It was had a lot to do with my upbringing. So yeah, there you go. Look at us, we're Eskimo brothers. Via baseball, Gary Gaetti, the white rat.
Screw the Twins.
You might be too young to really appreciate Gary Gaetti for his years.
I believe I am.
Awesome.
I watched the '86 documentary, though. He was really good for the Mets, right?
Exactly. I've seen that in books and stories. But yeah,
what are
great
books?
to be on with you guys. Yeah, exactly. And welcome, Charlie. Really nice to have you on with us.
All right, guys. So I know we've done mock drafts in formats here before. We did one. Me and Joe were lucky enough to go on the Dynasty show and do one. But we wanted to get through all the rounds and figure out a way to do that. When you're doing it live and actually doing the picks, it's too difficult. So that's why we drafted before. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go through the first 6 rounds and kind of each of us give our favorite, picks. Basically, who do we think was the most solid pick there and who has the most upside? Because the first 6 rounds, hopefully that's all your picks are either solid picks or got a lot of upside. And then we're going to rotate from round 7 on and give our best pick and biggest reach. And then that way, hopefully we can get through them all and people can really hear, where people are going. Just so you know, for this draft, because you have to set, settings, or otherwise people are going to be like, what the hell are we doing here? It is a best ball, half-point PPR. So just remember that as we go through it. But real quickly, let me go through the first round, which I thought that it went kind of like what we thought it would. The first pick was Jonathan Taylor. Second was Cooper Kupp. Third was Christian McCaffrey. Fourth, Austin Eckler. Fifth, Derrick Henry. Sixth, in your face, Joe Matz, who was picking right after me, Justin Jefferson. Joe then took Jamar Chase, then Devontae Adams, Naji Harris, Dalvin Cook, Jorge with the Nick Chubb. I love it. Go Dogs. And Travis Kelce rounding out the first round. Nate, why don't you go first? What did you think was the most solid pick and which one had the most upside?
So, when looking at Najee at 9, at that spot right there after what some people would consider the top 4, the big 4 of the running backs, and then that first tier of wide receivers, Najee provides just for me that as stable a base with the lack of question marks. I love Dalvin. I love Aaron Jones, some of the next running backs in that grouping, but true bell cow, just consistent. I feel like it's just that safe floor. And what they say, you can't win a league at the first round, but you can lose it. And that whole adage, Najee just is about as safe as can be. And biggest upside, I almost have to always go CMC, because if you get a full season, granted, I know he was a 3rd pick, so it's not like he was the 11th pick with number 1 overall upside, but legitimate league winning ×2 upside. I mean, it's harkens back to the old LT days.
I will be livid if that's the case, because anybody who's listened to our podcast knows that I took him last year in my first ever auction draft, spent like $64 on him. First 5 weeks, it was just the greatest pick ever. And then from that point on, I was not loving it, to say the least. But for me, I think Cooper Kupp is the most steady. I think that was very smart to go second. I said on the podcast earlier that in any kind of PPR format, I think after Jonathan Taylor, he's the safest pick in football. 2nd year of him in Stafford. In the Super Bowl, you just have to look at that, where all the injuries, everybody is keening in on Cooper Kupp. And what did they do? They just drove right down the field twice and, won the game. So I believe Kupp has a great chance to equal or outperform his targets and receptions. I don't know if he can do the same in yards and touchdowns, because that was just bonkers, but he's going to get the same kind of numbers that he did last year. For the upside, Dalvin Cook, which me and Joe touched on this a little bit last week, and we've really been discussing this in offline conversations. The Minnesota Vikings, with their new offensive coordinator and the style offense they're going to run, I mean, you're going to have Justin Jefferson running basically the Cooper Kupp role, but don't forget that Dalvin Cook is going to get into an offense that Todd Gurley in 2017, 1st in fantasy scoring, 2018, 1st in fantasy scoring. In those seasons, he averaged 24 touches in both 2017 and 2018. Even when he was banged up in 2019, he still had 18-plus touches. I think we can kind of all agree Dalvin Cook is every bit as talented as a back as Todd Gurley is. And this is going to be the first time I think he's really going to be unleashed in an offense that can utilize his talents. So it would not surprise me if he has a big jump this year. And that's why I thought it was the most upside. Charlie, who'd you have?
Well, I could sit here and go with my pick, Jonathan Taylor, but I think that's kind of easy. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to actually go with Joe's pick in Jamar Chase.
Yeah.
I think last year, him and Joe Burrow proved that they were the 2nd best QB wide receiver stack, right behind Stafford and Kupp, obviously. But I think Jamar Chase has probably one of the safest players in the first round right now. For my upside pick, I'm going to actually go with Naji Harris. I know Nate said that's his best pick, and I completely agree with everything that Nate said. But I think we see a lot more from Naji Harris in this year, because they don't have Ben Roethlisberger, that gunslinger who's going to throw the ball down the field anymore. They've got a pretty big QB battle with rookie Kenny Pickett, and Mitch Trubisky. So I think they're going to rely a lot more on the run this year. And on the Pivot podcast, Coach Mike Tomlin has said that Najee's going to have to be a bell cow for us. He's going to need to step up his game and do a lot better than he did last year. And he was great last year. He was 3rd in PPR scoring for running backs, but I think we see a possible RB1 season out of Naji Harris this year.
Joseph?
I'll return the favor and why doubt it? Jonathan Taylor. And I give you credit for it, because we got to opt in on where we picked in the draft, and 3 of us picked where we slotted in before Charlie came in and took the number 1 slot. And I'm not really sure what the rest of us were doing, because I don't know how it works in best ball. I don't know the stats, but I know that if you look at the historically who has the best chance to win a league in a snake draft, it's the person picking number 1. And I think that's all the more true when you have a very clear, in my mind, number one at Jonathan Taylor. For upside, I'll actually go with a pick that I don't love because I'm kind of fading this guy. But the reality is, Derrick Henry scored 23 points per game in half PPR last year. Like that was the highest of any flex player. So if he can stay healthy, who's to say he's not number one again? So you're getting that guy at 5. You got to feel pretty good.
And just so y'all know, me and Joe started fading Henry last year. We're a big believer in running backs get so many carries, and then there is diminishing returns. And we definitely are not thrilled when anybody gets hurt. But when he got injured last year, we're kind of saying this is what happens when you overutilize a running back, especially when they were doing it late in the season before when they didn't even need to. They did some things where you just got to protect running backs. All right, second round. It starts with Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs. Aaron Jones went 3rd, going back the other way. Joe Mixon 4th. CeeDee Lamb 5th. DeAndre Swift 6th. Javonte Williams 7th. Mark Andrews 8th. Alvin Kamara 9th. Saquon Barkley 10th. Leonard Fournette 11th. And Kyle Pitts 12th. And CeeDee Lamb, for me, it's easy, is the most solid pick here. He hit 19 and 20% target shares his first 2 years. With Cooper gone, I think 25% is the floor for what his share is going to be. And he's put up great numbers on only receiving 19, 20% of the targets. I hope they're going to utilize him in a little different way. We saw in the playoff game that they don't always find a way to get him the ball no matter what. And when he's your best player at receiver, you could even go Deebo Samuel, with him if that's just a way to get him the ball in space and get him moving. They did a bad job of that. This is not just a homer pick, but my upside guy is Kyle Pitts. He was double covered on 25% of his plays last year. He was forced to the outside a lot, and it was because the Falcons had no outside receivers. Literally, he was not able to line up as a tight end, which his numbers versus linebackers and safeties were much better than versus corners. It's pretty obvious. But he had, as a rookie, 29 plays of 15 yards or more. That was 11 more than any other tight end. Kyle Pitts is going to be a monster. And the addition of Drake London is going to allow him to not just basically be their number one receiver on the outside, which is what it was at times last year. I can't wait to see what they do with this guy in year 2 as a fan. And I keep telling people for fantasy purposes, he's basically a wide receiver, not a tight end. I would not be surprised if he's tight end number 1 by the end of the year. Kelsey is really the only person that I'm super concerned, if they both had great years, could outscore him. He's going to be a beast. Joe, who you got?
My favorite pick of that first round.
Second
round. My bad. I think I'd have to go with Joe Mixon. I just think that's really good value there at 16. I think he's should have gone in that 10 to 12 range. I just think that offense is taking off. This is by far the best offensive line Joe Mixon's ever run behind. I assume teams are going to be keying up to stop the pass, and I don't think Zach Taylor, he's coming from that Rams offense, the McVay offense. He's going to want to run the ball if teams are going all out to stop the pass. So I don't think he's going to see a loss in touches. And I think his red zone opportunity is skyrocketing because he's their clear guy in the red zone, and they're going to be in the red zone a lot. So I think he's a really good value there at 16. Highest upside, though, is Saquon Barkley at 22. Last year, he was still going top 5, top 10, and obviously it was a huge disappointment. But now he's another full year past that injury. Better offensive line. And again, as a Giants fan and a fantasy person, I cannot emphasize enough how much better the offensive coaching is going to be. And I think they're going to utilize him in a lot of ways that, unsurprisingly, Jason Garrett did not. So I love the upside there. The overall riskiness of the McCaffrey-Barkley combo, too, for our Chalupa Batman. Was I love Zach's aggressiveness there. McCaffrey, Barkley, go big, because if both of those hit, he's so far in front of everyone else.
Charlie, you also have Barkley, right? For your upside, why don't you go over your guys?
Yeah, I'm gonna start with another pick from Joe as my best pick in DeAndre Swift. I think he has the chance to finish this year as a top 10 scorer for running backs. I can see him outscoring a couple of guys that I'm looking at in the first round and a lot of those guys in the second round. I think he just has a lot better running ability and pass catching ability that can make him a really viable option this year. And then for my upside pick, I said Saquon Barkley. I am also a Giants fan, and I can definitely see the bounce back this year coming. We drafted Evan Neal. We've got Andrew Thomas on the O-line. The defense has stepped up. So I'm in love with this new coaching regime, this new management regime, complete overhaul. I think the Giants have a really good year, and I think Barkley could be at the helm of what could be a pretty electric Giants offense.
Nate, I'm sure you're going to say Stephon Diggs right after Jorge chimed in there.
Yeah, exactly what I'm going to say. If I don't want to say that because I don't want to have the Gabriel Davis truthers come banging my door down, telling me how stupid I am, and they are in droves this year. That'll be the name, of course. I'll be shocked or surprised if anybody does or does not mention his name just because of the helium. But
He'll be mentioned.
I'm sure. Rightfully so. Don't get me wrong. As a Chiefs fan, unfortunately, I can recall one specific play that stings still a little bit. I mean, it doesn't sting anymore. It's like, it's gone after the victory and all. But, as far as I hate to say it's the best pick because I always hate taking my own picks just because I feel like that's just such a cheapskate way out. But if I'm considering with my first round pick of Aaron Jones and Dalvin Cook, and I went back and forth and I had the chance to get both, why wouldn't I say for me? And I know A.J. Dillon is going to, pilfer something in that offense. The question I have is how much utilization will both of those two guys have on the field at the same time? Because let's be honest, we can go through the Packers offense and there's not a ton of names playmaker wise that are going to scare opposing defenses. Sorry, Sammy Watkins, you're not on my list. Christian Watson will have to fill in. Allen Lazard, Randall Cobb. I think we get the idea there. And we have a top 10 back that already saw 65 receptions or targets last year. There's no reason for me not to think that he's not going to eclipse that number if he stays healthy, of course. Again, I don't want to spend too much time because I feel like I'm, patting myself on the back and that's stupid. So I'll move on to the biggest upside. And as much as I think that Saquon definitely delivers, I have to look at positional upside. And Kyle Pitts already has an advantage over, 12 or, since there's 12 teams, we'll say 9 other tight ends. It's even further when you look at a vacated targets, even if it's just Russell Gage. I mean, I know that's not going to translate into exclusive targets going his direction, but there's no reason not to think as you said, Keith, he's a wide receiver completely in a tight end body. He's a freak.
And a big tight end body.
Oh my God.
Just to add on to your Aaron Jones thing, I told Joe when we went over running backs, I would not be surprised if Aaron Jones leads the Packers in targets and receptions this season. It would not shock me at all. Go back to the Falcons game. I think it was either last year or the year before when all the receivers had COVID. He scored 4 touchdowns, 3 of them receiving versus my Falcons. He's going to be used. And I think that the Packers are smart enough that they're going to move him around to your point where we're going to see A.J. Dillon in the backfield, and whether it be Aaron Jones beside him and that, they split him out or whether they move him into slot. I love Aaron Jones. I have him a lot higher than most do on the running back board. All right, moving. Go ahead.
No, he had 3 touchdowns last year against Detroit, receiving as well.
He is I think it's going to be a big year for Aaron Jones. They're going to get creative when they have to. They don't have any other options. The third round, we got Mike Evans went first, David Montgomery second, T. Higgins third, Deebo Samuel fourth, Tyra Kill fifth, Justin Herbert sixth, Cam Akers seventh, A.J. Brown eighth, Patrick Mahomes ninth, Keenan Allen 10th, Ezekiel Elliott 11th, and Deontay Johnson 12th. Joe, why don't you go ahead and go first? Who you got for the most steady pick and biggest upside?
I really like the Deebo pick. I just look at that. What I love about the Deebo pick is there's so much in that San Francisco offense that is up in the air with Trey Lance coming in. Does he steal a bunch of running back touchdowns near the goal line? Is he effective passing to the outside? I think Deebo's kind of foolproof in that way, though. So much of what he does is just getting the ball near the line of scrimmage or even behind it and just going to work. You look at last year, he played 16 of the 17 games. 7 times he broke 20 points. just something you really want to look for in best ball. You need the guys with the explosion games. Only twice below 10. So he's also giving you that consistency. So I really like that pick. For upside, I like Mike Evans. PFF just, I think it was yesterday, posted their route running grades. They're breaking down wide receivers now over the last 3 years on grading them on route running, on production at the catch point, and production after the catch. And by far, over the last 3 years, the number one graded guy over expectation in route running was Mike Evans. And now you're telling me Antonio Brown is gone, obviously. Gronk is retired, which is huge because he's already a huge red zone threat, and now you're removing Gronk. And then we don't know when Chris Godwin's coming back. So this is going to be the Mike Evans show in Tampa Bay. So I think the upside there is huge.
Nate, why don't you go next?
You've beautifully segued into both my most solid and my biggest upside is Mike Evans. I mean, granted, it's skin, first pick of the third round, but you have you already have everything that you just mentioned, and I think is there potential touchdown regression? I mean, anytime you go from one year to the next, of course, you have to always bake that in, but I don't know if there is. And then if you go one step even further and you're thinking, all right, here we have a wide receiver one, what would be the target share of Mike Evans? And typically speaking, you want something over 25%, 20, somewhere around that general range if you want your one. And you have to scroll so far down to get down to his 16.9% target share that almost guaranteed to go up by, I'm going to say 10%. And 10% of what do you think Brady has? Let's say his 700 passing attempts this year is cut down by 10%. Now he's got 650, 25% target share with that big body in the end zone. Screams, 1,300 plus yards and double-digit touchdowns almost. I don't want to say with his eyes closed because that's never fair to say. But there's pretty good evidence that he can do that this year.
No, you can say it because he had 3 games last year without Antonio Brown or Curtis Godwin, 28% target share in those games, and he scored 5 touchdowns. Okay. So it's going to be a monster year for Mike Evans. And what's great, again, is what's the one thing we love about Evans, and this is a best ball league, is you want guys that are going to go off and have these huge games. Mike Evans is notorious for that. So I'm going to co-sign. I will mention, though, just real quickly, Justin Herbert, which again, hate getting your pick, but I love being able to get him in the third round. Obviously, I think Josh Allen is, the quarterback that you want, but Herbert just keeps getting better. I mean, me and Joe talked about it last year, and we were wrong that we thought there might actually be regression because he was so good on big down the field throws, and his numbers pretty much held. So I think that's just who he is. And you got to think that each year he's going to get smarter, understand defenses more. I think it's a very good chance he's a top 3 quarterback in scoring. The upside guy is Tyra Kill. I know some people are leery, but you don't trade for Tyra Kill. You don't give up all the stuff that they did if they're not going to pepper him with targets. And I just have this suspicion that Tyra Kill is probably tired of hearing that, Mahomes made him. And I think he's going to really want to show that he is the baddest man in the NFL when he gets the ball in his hands. I mean, there is no more terrifying guy, running back, receiver, punt returner in the world than Tyra Kill once he gets that ball, especially if he creates some space. So I think the upside is huge for him. Charlie, who you got in the third?
So I'm going to bring it all the way back to Mike Evans. I know we've talked a lot about him, but I'm going to give my reasoning as to why I picked him instead of the other guys. On that turn into the third round, I had a choice between either Mike Evans, I think it was Debo, Terry Kill, and A.J. Brown were there. On my article about Devontae Smith, I explained why I'm not a big fan of A.J. Brown. There's a whole receiving depth that I go into if you want to read that. So I'm not really big on A.J. Brown this year, and I'm not that big on Tyreek Hill. You did say, he is poised for a pretty good season. I'd rather go with the safe pick in Mike Evans, who for the past 8 years has had 1,000 receiving yards in his first 8 years of his career. Only wide receiver to do that in NFL history. And I know Deebo Samuel was there too, but I'm not really sure. I'm kind of iffy on him because he still wants out of San Francisco. There's a chance that he sits out and doesn't play. So I didn't want to risk that. I'm going to go with Mike Evans with the safe pick. And for my upside pick, I'm actually going to go with T. Higgins. Solid receiver, really good number 2 over there in Cincinnati. And to go back to A.J. Brown, he made a comment about Devontae Smith, saying that Devontae Smith is a wide receiver 1 who's going to get cornerback 2 coverage. I see the same scenario with T. Higgins. Jamar Chase is going to have a great season, but he's going to attract a ton of defensive attention this year because of his success last year. And I think that translates into a lot of production for T. Higgins this year.
All right, moving on to the 4th round. We started with James Conner was the first pick in the 4th round. And then some receivers, Jalen Waddle, Michael Pittman. Then we had a mini run on tight ends and George Kittle and Darren Waller. Back to receivers for DJ Moore and Scary Terry McLaurin. Lamar Jackson went 8th. His running back, J.K. Dobbins, went 9th. Travis Etienne went 10th. Josh Jacobs, 11th. And Breece Hall, 12th. Nate, why don't you start us for the 4th round?
Sure. As far as solid pick, when you go tight end, quarterback, and you get your number 1 receiver in Deontay Johnson, at that point, you're going to, at some point, need to pivot, most likely. The zero RB truthers will, again, I'm going to have a lot of pitchforks at my front door after this. Better be careful. There's not, in my opinion, as far as from a safe, just secure, guarantees a stretch. Don't want to say guaranteed, but James Conner is your 1 in the 4th round, just gives you that floor that you're asking for. I mean, granted, 18 touchdowns I don't think is necessarily repeatable, but who else is touching the ball in the red zone? 6 weeks without D-Hop, they don't have that big body threat. I think that it's going to be Kyler's comfort just to hand the ball. If we saw it last year with Conner a ton as it was, and I don't think anything's changing on that offense. And the defense, it's improving each year. Obviously, this is not an IDP or defensive show, so I won't go elaborate. But they're looking to get the lead and try to control the clock a little bit. And I think that Connor's going to be asked to carry a heavy workload when it comes to that. And then biggest upside, I got to say Travis Etienne. Zach, if he's paying attention, God, he's probably just, oozing with confidence right now because we've touched on one of his players in each round, and rightfully so. Etienne has upside glory. I mean, last year at the same time, we were talking about just James Robinson was coming off of a historic season, just getting the boot because Travis Etienne's in town. Now, of course, that didn't happen, but he's another year recovered. That offense, I think, has some dynamic attributes to it. The offensive line's better, and Travis Etienne clearly, from a skill set standpoint, is one of the most dynamic running backs to enter the league. Great pass catcher. Has all the makings to really be as your number 3 on those best ball blow up weeks. I think that's Etienne where he might shine.
Yeah, and not having Urban Meyer as your head coach.
That should have been my lead in. That should have been the only thing I said. No Urban Meyer, and that didn't quit.
For me, the solid pick was Lamar Jackson. I think it's easy to forget who that guy was because last year he disappointed, but he still had those flashes. And I think so much of the struggles for the Ravens last year was just all the injuries at running back. I mean, what made them so explosive the year before was they had multiple backs for Lamar to hand the ball off to. They could get really creative with their play calling, especially in the run schemes with Lamar. I expect a huge bounce back year. And the main reason I think that is J.K. Dobbins is my upside guy. Dobbins in his last 6 games, I keep banging this drum as we talk about running backs. 7 touchdowns. He had 77 carries for 495 yards, 6.4 yards per carry. That was his last 6 games. He's going to make their offense so explosive. And I'm also a big Bateman fan, which is another reason I think Lamar is going to make a step up. Obviously, you got Andrews, which I'm not quite as high on, only because if you look, a lot of his big games were with Huntley, like his monster games were. But he's still a great tight end and a great weapon. I think the Ravens' offense is going to be really good again this year. And we may be going, how did we let Lamar drop to like the 5th quarterback, selected? Joe?
My safe one, I think I got to go with James Conner as well. I mean, I think the idea of James Conner, he just seems unexciting to people. You're just kind of like, yeah, he's fine. Like, he'll give you the points. He was 6th among running backs in half PPR in points per game. So it's not like he's just trudging along and he's just, he accumulates points. Like, no, he's legitimately was a running back 1 last year. So getting him in the 4th round, you got to feel good about that. That's steady. The upside for me is the guy you and I loved preseason last year, J.K. Dobbins. I mean, just go back. You look at his healthy years, rookie year. There had 3 running backs in the Ravens that year who had at least 70 carries. He averaged a yard more than Gus Edwards at 6 yards per attempt. And then Mark Ingram was down 4.2. Like, he was by far the most productive back in that offense. And so, yeah, if you're giving him 200 and 250 carries, I mean, he's going to go off. So I'm buying in on J.K. Dobbins heavily. So I think he could be a running back 1.
Charlie?
So my safe pick is going to be Lamar Jackson. When you look at those first 4 or 5 quarterbacks taken in that draft, I see Josh Allen, Herbert, Mahomes, and Lamar Jackson as like that top tier of fantasy value in quarterback. And Lamar Jackson's the last one being taken. So I think you're going to get your bang for your buck in the 4th round with Lamar at QB. And for my upside pick, I'm going to go with Michael Pittman. I think the move for Matt Ryan to go from Atlanta to the Colts has been severely underrated. I think they're going to be a really, really solid team. They got a really good quarterback, great O-line, great offensive weapons, and a pretty solid defense too. So I think Michael Pittman takes over for Matt Ryan as his Julio Jones in the sense of being a wide receiver 1. I think Pittman has a career year this year.
And Ryan has always done well with big receivers. When Tony G was there, even after Tony didn't have his, best stuff, those big Roddy White, I mean, it's always these big physical receivers. Michael Pittman is definitely one of those guys. The 5th round started with DK Metcalf, then Amari Cooper, who's now in Cleveland, Joe Burrow going 3rd, Antonio Gibson 4th, Elijah Mitchell 5th, Cortland Sutton 6th, Jalen Hurts 7th, Mike Williams 8th, Jerry Jeudy 9th, Allen Robinson 10th, Jorge going with Kareem Hunt. He already had Nick Chubb. He says to, go ahead and have at his team. This is where I can say, I don't know. It's a little something. And then Clyde Edwards-Helaire rounding it out. Charlie, why don't you go ahead and start us off for round 5?
So for round 5, my best pick is going to be my pick again in DK Metcalf. I know there's got a lot of question marks over there for the Seattle's QB, but I think Metcalf will be fine. He'll find ways to be fantasy relevant. He's a freak of an athlete, so I think he'll get his touches. He'll make his mark in your lineup. For my upside pick, I'm going to go with Jerry Jeudy. I know a lot of people say Cortland Sutton, but I think Jerry Jeudy has the chance to take over in that Broncos offense as a slightly bigger Tyler Lockett for Russell Wilson. Overall, that offense is going to take a massive boost with Wilson at QB, but I think Jeudy has a lot of upside over there.
Joseph?
For my the solid, I feel good about it pick. I like Antonio Gibson. I just think he's the clear number 1 back. And now, I mean, I know no one likes Carson Wentz, but compare him to what was there the last 2 years in Washington. And you don't feel good maybe if you're Jorge and you're a Washington fan that he's going to lead you to the playoffs, but you have to feel a little bit better about everyone's fantasy output. So I think Antonio Gibson, I think you should, whatever you felt about him towards the end of last season, you should feel higher on him now. And for upside, this is kind of specific to this team, but going with Zach again, Joe Burrow, because he has that Higgins stack. If Burrow really does take another step forward and he has an MVP type season and you've got T. Higgins on your team already, I think that's a combination that, again, this is something you really got to think about with best ball is when you're stacking guys. If that stack goes off, he's in a great spot.
So the Jalen Hurts pick to me here, he should have gone before Joe Burrow. He just should have. He was 6th in QB scoring last year. He scored 20 plus in 9 of 16 games, 25 or more, 5 of 16. They've added another weapon. They showed that they actually knew that they needed to run the ball at the end of the season, which is only going to help a young quarterback. And if you look at his numbers, he's just improved not only every year, but as the season has gone on. It seems like every 4 or 5 games he gets a little bit better at everything. Intermediate passes, down the field passing, obviously has the ability to scramble. I think he is underrated. Me and Joe, I think both have him right in that top 5 echelon right there, just below. Obviously, you got Josh Allen and I think Lamar are the two that can score without a doubt the most points. But I think he's right there with, if he runs and throws enough touchdowns, he can score with what Herbert and Mahomes has, and he's just very consistent. But the guy that with the upside is Cortland Sutton. He is going to be a touchdown monster with Russell Wilson. Wilson was top 5 in touchdown to red zone conversions. One of his receivers was the last 3 years. Top 5 in red zone targets was one of Russell Wilson's receivers the last 3 years. And Cortland Sutton in 2019 led the NFL in red zone targets. I think Jerry Jeudy is obviously going to probably end up with more receptions, but I would not be shocked at all if it's very similar to the to the Metcalf with, I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the other Seattle receiver all of a sudden. Lockett, thank you. Where you're going to see Lockett, like maybe with receptions, he's going to have more, but I think Sutton's going to definitely have a lot more touchdowns. I think he'll be in double digits this year and a potential to have a lot more in yards. I just think the Broncos offense as a whole is being underrated because it is such a huge upgrade to put Russell Wilson there, and they have 2 great backs. But I love Sutton because of his red zone ability. Nate?
And again, another good segue with Cortland Sutton, because I actually, as much as you have him as the high upside, I think he's almost as safe a floor play that you can find. I mean, realistically, everything that you just mentioned is accurate and true, and go a little bit further. And where was he last year in total air yards? He was at 1,756, right between Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. So that, a quarterback upgrade. Look at who they brought in. Russell Wilson, of course, who had the 6th highest passer rating of throws of 20-plus yards last season. And where's Cortland Sutton excel? A lot of the vertical threats. You have to pretty much say 3 names: Case Keenum, Joe Flacco, Drew Lock. That's what he's had to work with. And each time, short of injury, of course, he's been successful. And I think I love Jerry Jeudy as well. I think that's it's Sophie's choice. You're going to either be a Jerry Jeudy truther or you're going to be Cortland Sutton. And that's why I think that we'll find when the rankings come out at the end of the preseason and we get into it, we're going to see a lot of piggybacking back to back just because people can't decide which way. Right. And so you just put them 1 and 2. The Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods from 2 years ago, Tyler Lockett, DK each given week. And best ball, maybe both will blow up because you'll have consistent weeks. At least you don't have Drew Lock and Case Keenum and Trevor Siemian and that garbage carousel.
I think Joe made a great point too last week that the AFC West is just going to be a shootout every time those teams play. So it's not a bad idea to load up on players from those divisions because, I mean, that's 6 games a year that you got to think are probably going to be pretty high scoring because you're just going to have to score to win games against the other teams in that division because I think people are sleeping on the Raiders, who are also going to be very good offensively. The 6th round, we got Michael Thomas with the 1st pick, TJ Hawkinson 2nd. Running backs, Miles Sanders and Damian Harris went 3rd and 4th. Kyler Murray 5th. Dalton Schultz 6th. A.J. Dillon 7th. Marquis Brown, Chris Godwin, and Brandon Cooks 8th, 9th, 10th. Brady 11th. And Amon St. Brown went 12th. Nate, we share the exact same pick, so why don't you go over the safe pick, and then I'll do the upside one.
Yeah, I mean, is there anybody safer than Brandon Cooks? I mean, he's had, don't get me wrong, he's had a plethora of different teams, and he's pretty much gotten 1,000 yards with everybody under at quarterback. Now I think that's a narrative. Sometimes it gets thrown out. Everybody, myself included, says he's had 15 different teams and he's done. He's also had good quarterbacks at each location too. It's not like he didn't have the Trevor Siemian, Case Keenum pet situation. Last year was probably the worst, and we saw an improvement. And I think Davis Mills is an improving quarterback personally. That's my 2 cents. I think he's accurate, which bodes really well for Brandon Cooks. There's nobody else really taking targets away from him. I don't see anybody that's going to occupy more than an 18% target share, maybe short of maybe our boy Brevin Jordan, depending upon how he goes. I don't know if he's your boy or not. I throw our the rest of the community into that clump right there. But yeah, it's just safe, simple, and where he as your number 2, Oh, it's Zach again. Can I change my pick? Brandon Cook sucks, Zach, and your team's garbage. On to you, Keith.
And just to add for Cooks real quick, 6 of 7 seasons, you mentioned 1,000 yards. 6 of 7 seasons, he's been a top 20 wide receiver. So, I mean, and again, the Texans are going to be bad. They're going to be down. I always look at that too. I do. If it's between two receivers or two teams, I'm looking, okay, which one's going to be bad, down and throwing a lot? The Texans definitely meet that criteria. But Miles Sanders is my upside. Joe has been really beating this drum, and it's finally converted me. I'm a true believer now, Joe. Thanks a lot. But the Eagles were 7-3 after they decided that it wasn't smart to throw the ball 65% of the time on first down. I mean, who would have thought running the ball with a running quarterback would have helped him out? But not only that, he had 90 yards or more in 3 of his last 5, 16 carries or more in 3 of his last 5. And if you'd have seen his logs early in the season, I mean, it was shocking. The Eagles fans were giving standing ovations when the guy would get a carry midway through the season. It was that bad with the play calling. I think they're going to be even more run heavy this year because they have such good weapons for play action pass. And obviously A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith. And I believe in Jalen Hurts. I think the Eagles offense is going to be frisky. They're in a bad division. I think Sanders has a chance to have a monster year, which is what we've been expecting for him for a few years. Charlie, who you got?
So for my safe pick in the 6th round, I'm going to go with Marquis Brown. That Cardinals offense took a massive hit with D-Hop being suspended for 6 games. And who better to be the wide receiver 1 for Kyler Murray than his former college teammate in Marquis Brown. So I think he has a really solid season, really good vertical threat. I think they'll air it out for a solid amount of that season. And then for my upside pick, I'm going to go with Dalton Schultz. The Cowboys lost both Amari Cooper and Cedric Wilson this offseason, so that frees up over 150 targets for the Cowboys offense. So I think CeeDee Lamb sees a lot of those. I also think Schultz sees a lot of those, especially in the red zone. He was a huge red zone threat last year for Dak Prescott, so I think he'll improve on that even more.
Joe?
All right. Well, my original was I also just joined in and also thought that Brandon Cooks is just the safest guy in the world.
Zach's going to be insufferable.
But I'll go ahead and actually piggyback on Charlie on my own pick of Dalton Schultz, but as my floor guy, just because, again, as he just said, a bunch of targets are gone from that offense. This is a guy who had a huge year last year. I mean, 78 receptions, 808 yards, 8 touchdowns. And again, to that red zone point that Charlie just made, he has more touchdown receptions over the last 2 years than Kittle or Waller. Granted, those guys have been hurt, but if for Kittle, it's the last 3 years. So this guy, I just think, to me, he's like the 5th tight end. I think once you get past those top 4, he's the guy to me. I love his floor. Ceiling, I mean, Mike Thomas. I mean, this is the guy he was the Cooper Kupp just a couple years back. I mean, people forget. Back-to-back years led the league in receptions, 149 for 1,700 yards in 2019. First 4 years of his career, hit at least 90 receptions, 1,100 yards, and 5 touchdowns. And we know Jameis Winston can keep receivers fantasy relevant from his time in Tampa. So I think the value there in the 6th round is really high if things work out for him and Jameis.
All right, so the rest of the way, because we don't want to spend too much time, we're going to rotate rounds where we're going to ask one of us to take each round, and we're going to give again, best pick, and then we're going to say biggest reach because I don't like trashing people. We're just going to leave it as it's a reach. So real quick to go over to 7th before Nate gives his for that round. We had Ken Walker as the first pick, Adam Thielen 2nd, Rashad Bateman 3rd, DeAndre Hopkins 4th, Treylon Burks 5th, Darnell Mooney 6th, Devontae Smith 7, Cordell Patterson 8, Garrett Wilson 9th, Juju 10th, Dak Prescott 11th, and my boy Drake London 12th. Nate, go ahead. Who did you like, and who did you think was a reach?
This is Zach's show, and that's the disappointing part about being at the other end is there were so many times that picks came around, and it's Rashad Bateman. And the narratives are finding out that I think Rashad Bateman's kind of the sleeper honey of a lot of people, but rightfully so. Obviously, with Hollywood out, his 26% target share is gone. Vacated targets are there. Lamar has a good connection with Bateman already. And as much as we do believe, and we know this will be a run-first team, the defense got, picked apart last year a little bit. They lose their defensive coordinator. There's a chance that the offense might actually have to throw a little bit more to stay in games. And that's a possibility we have to consider, as much as that means that maybe Lamar puts more on his shoulders. I think that could be Rashad Bateman is the recipient of even more potential work. And initially, my reach was going to be Garrett Wilson, simply just because I don't think the Jets have enough offense to spread around to 3 different receivers. But I'm going to go because I've overlooked one. And Charlie, I don't want to beat up on anything, but Ken Walker now versus Kenneth Walker. I just have I'm a Rashad Penny fan, and Rashad Penny, obviously we know is as fragile as anything. But from week 13 on, he was the number 1 running back in half-point PPR scoring. And if Pete Carroll does anything at his age, he likes to stick with things that he knows. Metamucil in the morning, Murder She Wrote at night. Go to bed. Start Rashad Penny until he gets hurt, and then Ken Walker takes over. So as much as it's not a huge reach because the upside is there, I'm just a Penny truther.
I don't know if it shows your age or my age more that the Murder She Wrote joke, you used it, and I found it that funny. So
yeah.
God, we're getting old. So for the 8th round, Charlie, this is going to be yours. Tyler Lockett went first. Stafford and Wilson had a little run on quarterback, 2nd, 3rd. Elijah Moore, 4th. Tony Pollard, 5th. Gabriel Davis, 6th. James Cook, 7th. Hunter Renfrow, 8th. Dallas Goedert, 9th. Brandon Ayuk, 10th. Robert Woods, 11th. And Devin Singletary, 12th.
So for my best pick, I'm going to go with Tony Pollard. This is the guy I wrote my last article on. I think he has a really solid season this year. He has the chance, in my opinion, to overtake Zeke for that lead role. Last season, he outranked Zeke in yards per rushing attempt, PFF grades for offense, rushing the ball, run blocking. He had more yards after contact per attempt and a better PFF elusive grade, and he outranked him in a lot of pass catching aspects too. More yards per reception, better PFF receiving grade, yards after catch per reception, yards per route ran, and had a better NFL passing grade when targeted. So I think Tony Pollard is an absolute steal in 8th rounds for a possible flex player, running back 2 in your lineup. And then for my reach, I'm going to go with Gabe Davis. I know we talked about him before. He's going to get brought up now. There's a lot of hype on this guy. Nothing against him. He had a great game against the Chiefs and in the playoffs last year. I think the ADP is riding on the hype, and I think people are going to get let down this year.
The only thing I will say is for a best ball draft, I actually love that pick because at this point you're looking for guys with a huge upside. I'm with you all that I think that it's very unlikely that he lives up to the hype. But God almighty, if he just has a few games like he did against Kansas City in that playoff going for a best ball league, that's what you're looking for around this pick. So it really just depends on what kind of draft you're in. Joe, for the 10th round, we're going to go to you, my friend. Christian Watson went first. Chase Claypool 2nd. Kadarius Toney, your boy, went 3rd. Christian Kirk 4th. Ronald Jones. Actually, I skipped around. I'm sorry about that, boys. So round 9 actually went Chase.
I was going to say, shoot, I was looking at the wrong round.
That was my bad, buddy. Melvin Gordon 2nd. Trey Lance 3rd. Aaron Rodgers 4th. Rashad Penny 5th. Jamison Williams 6th. Michael Carter 7th. Sky Moore 8th. Dawson Knox 9th. Zach Ertz 10th. My boy Damian Pierce 11th. Great pick, Jorge. And Pat Freiermuth 12th.
I hate to do it, but it's Trey Lance. It's Zach's pick again. And I don't know if I would say this in a non-best ball draft, right, but I just think you're looking at the upside of what if Trey Lance hits? What if he's, the dynamic running quarterback in a Kyle Shanahan offense? I mean, this guy is literally the limit. So I love that pick, and he pairs him with Burrow. So that's, if Lance sucks, you're not screwed there. But I love the upside there. I'm going to pick for my reach. This is a tough one. I think I might have to go with my boy Keith. I get the Jameson Williams upside. I just wonder if it's like a round too early for me, just because he's a rookie. He's starting banged up. It is possible to still go off that way. I mean, that's what Odell Beckham did back in the day, but I love him year 2. I just don't know if year 1, if I like him this early, especially ahead of Sky Moore, who's in a dynamic offense and is fully healthy. So
even when you have Justin Jefferson, Terry McLaurin, Cortland Sutton, and Darnell Mooney already on your roster?
that's fair, but then why not grab like a Michael Carter or Ronald? What if Ronald Jones takes the right? But I'm saying you've already got the receiver upside, so let's get some more running backs in there.
Who needs running backs? Going to the 10th round, we got Christian Watson, Chase Claypool, Kadarius Toney, Christian Kirk, Ronald Jones, Isaiah Spiller. I'm not even going to try to pronounce Albert, the tight end for Denver's last name, Alan Lazard, James Robinson, Cole Kmet, Mike Gesicki, and Chris Olave. I got to give Charlie the pick here. Everything coming out of Saints camp is this guy is the real deal. And I was down on him. If you listen to all of our prep for the draft, I didn't understand it. I thought that there was 4 or 5 receivers that were better than him. But unless the Saints and their entire organization, the media, it's a conspiracy, Westworld level, this guy is apparently the real deal and is showing everything you need to in camp. And Jameis Winston can throw the ball down the field, which is what Chris Olave is, supposedly great at. The fact that Michael Thomas is coming back, meaning he ain't going to have too much on his shoulders. So again, for a best ball league, I love that play. And you got Kamara may be gone for, 4 to 6 games they're saying. So that means they'll probably be a little bit more pass heavy for that. For the reach, I'm going to go Gesicki. He's a receiver for all intents and purposes. Me and Joe talked about this all the time on the Daily Fantasy Pod last year. He never lines up as a tight end. He's a receiver. And I just think that to go right after Cole Kmet when you've added Tyra Kill and Jalen Waddle got such the targets he did, maybe I'm wrong, but I just think that you're going to see I just don't know what routes he's going to run. I think it's going to be more down the field stuff because if I had the choice of getting Jalen Waddle or Tyreek Hill or Mike Gesicki a 5 or 10 yard slant or route, I'm going to take the 2 speedsters and tell Gesicki to go deep, which we know Tua can't do. So that's going to be my reach. For the 11th round, Nate, we had Stevenson for New England, Madison for Minnesota, Tyler Boyd, Hunter Henry, Tyler Algier, Russell Gage, Darrell Henderson, 2 quarterbacks in Derek Carr, Deshaun Watson, Marlon Mack, Michael Gallup, and Kirk Cousins.
Yeah, my best pick is going to be Russell Gage. A lot of that rides on Chris Godwin's shoulders. If he's actually going to be healthy by week 1, I don't believe that necessarily. But last year, nearly 20% target share. Granted, I don't know if that same numbers translates with Tampa, but the increased passing game, if you take 19% target share with the 700 pass attempts or somewhere in that general range, you have 100 plus targets. And you give me a receiver in the 11th round with 100 target upside and a quarterback like Tom Brady getting the ball. I'm just comfortable with the potential. Even sometimes the consistency weeks. I know best ball, everybody wants the big blow up weeks, but there's nothing wrong with having a consistent floor as your number 3 receiver across the entire season and let people blow up and have those on off weeks. Because if you get 4 blow ups and 4 off weeks in the same week, well, you're still not in the best of shape, And then my reach, it's just Deshaun Watson. And I know that's the upside play too, but with great upside comes great reach, unfortunately, especially when you're dealing with, I don't know what superlative to use for Deshaun Watson, but there's a good chance that he misses the entire season. Pervert, whatever the case may be. It's just in a mock draft, it's easy just to toss the money, but you don't want to have to back up in the 11th round and have a wasted pick already. Save that for 15, 16.
I'm with you. All right. So for the 12th round, Charlie, we got Kenny Galladay, Irv Smith, who I love, Justin Fields, Marquez Valdez-Scantling for the Chiefs, Dotson for Washington, Higbee for the Rams, Rashad White for the Bucks, Brian Robinson for the Washington Commodores, or Commanders, what is it? Tua Tagovailoa for Miami, Tim Patrick of Denver, George Pickens for Pittsburgh, and Naheem Hines for Indy. Who you got from that, Charlie?
So my best pick in that round is probably going to be Kenny Galladay. I'll admit I was a big fan of Joe Judge coming into last season, but I don't know what happened with that offense. I don't know what he was thinking. He only targeted Kenny Galladay 76 times that entire season. I don't care who you are. You can't possibly be fantasy relevant if you're getting targeted 76 times, especially with the talent Kenny Galladay has. With this new offense, I think they're going to utilize him more. He's still relatively young for a receiver at 28. He's not too old. I think he could still make solid plays, and I think he could be a really big steal in the 12th round. My biggest reach, probably going to be Brian Robinson from the Commanders. I'm personally just staying away from that whole backfield. Ron Rivera has said that it's most likely going to be a committee, and there's a lot of running backs to be used over there. You got Antonio Gibson, who is the number one, but you also have J.D. McKissick, and you've got Jared Patterson, and now Brian Robinson, who's a rookie. Personally, I wouldn't take him over someone like Naheem Hines, who's a clear-cut RB2, and if, God forbid, Jonathan Taylor goes down, Naheem Hines has league-winning potential. So I would rather take Hines over a guy like Robinson.
I also just love any running back that is going to get receptions, which he's going to get that no matter what. We're going to go speed round the rest of the way. I'm not going to read because you can actually see them on the board, we will also post them on the website. But Joe, why don't you for the 13th round tell me who you like and who you think was the reach?
God, I keep not looking at who made the pick until after I've already decided on the guy. And God damn it, it's Khalil Herbert. Just 15th ranked running back on PFF. 6th. This is in their grades, not in their fantasy rankings, obviously. 6th on running the ball in their grading. The 4 games where he saw heavy usage, 97 yards a game. If David Montgomery goes down, I think he's going to be very productive. I think he has a role in the offense regardless. You're even higher on him because I think you're just lower on Montgomery than I am. Reach, it's got to be Rob Gronkowski. He's retired. I'm not sure who made these picks, but they eventually took 2 tight ends later on too, which I think was in part because they took Gronk. I don't know if you want to invest 4 tight ends in best ball, especially if it's only an 18-man roster. So I got to go.
Especially when one of them is not currently in the NFL.
Yes, it's never a great idea to pick a retired guy. So I'm going to go, especially in the 13th round. If this was round 18, I'd be fine with it.
So round 14, there were some really good selections. John Mechie for the Texans, I'm huge on him. I think he was one of the steals of the draft. Gerald Everett, Alec Pierce, like guys I really like. But give me Zamir White for the Raiders. The Raiders have already said that they're not bringing back either one of their running backs. And I just think he has a great chance to eat into Josh Jacobs, or at least be in a timeshare. Josh Jacobs has been banged up the last couple of years. If White ends up getting the lead back position, whether it be through injury or just play, again, I think that Raiders offense is going to be really good. For the reach, no offense, is Mac Jones. And this is not any disrespect to Mac Jones. It's a quarterback. I think he's a great quarterback, but I'm sorry, I'd probably take Winston, Jones, and Mills, who all went after them for fantasy purposes, just because of the offenses they're going to run. New England's going to try to run the ball. They're going to be up in games. Mac's not going to be asked to do a lot. Tom Brady, the greatest quarterback of all time, his first 4 or 5 seasons, was not asked to do a lot. He didn't throw a lot. I mean, so why would Mac Jones be put in that position? I think it's a little bit of a reach for that reason. So, Nate, who you got for round 15?
Yeah, 15. A lot of this rides on Alvin Kamara and his situation, but 15th round, I know as of right now he's a backup, but he's very easily the starter in New Orleans is Mark Ingram. When Kamara misses the first 6 weeks of the season. We don't know much about that. And as we've said, Mark Ingram, when given an opportunity, he has the ability to at least support solid weekly floors. I mean, if you look at last season against Tennessee, he had 14 points. Against Philadelphia, these were when he actually had decent snap percentages. 14.5 points, 15 points, 14 points. So the capabilities there. Obviously, if Kamara plays, it's a moot. But as far as reach is Chris Carson, and that's an auto pick, so it's hard to beat up on the computer. Sorry, computer, that was a shit pick. But Chris Carson with that cervical fusion has shown no signs that he's going to play this year, even further supplanting the Rashad Penny hype and beating up even more on the Ken Walker pick. Charlie, you're really, really dumb. Don't do that. We're welcoming him positively. See, that's positive reinforcement. Wow. But you're not as dumb as Jorge, so you have that working in your favor. And that's round 15.
Awesome.
Charlie, round 16.
Yeah. So for round 16, my best pick is going to be Noah Fant. He's going to have the same quarterback, hopefully for his sake, as last year. If not, a slight upgrade in Geno Smith. I think it's worth a late flyer to take a 16th round pick on Noah Fant. He could have some solid games here and there this season. For my reach, I'm going to also throw some shade at the Team 12 auto pick in Myles Gaskin. There's a reason why he dropped from RB1 on that Dolphins depth chart to RB4, because they went and got 3 other running backs this offseason. They clearly don't value Myles Gaskin anymore. I don't think he's fantasy relevant at all. There's a chance he might not even play this year if Chase Edmonds and Sony Michel produce the way they should. So I would not touch Myles Gaskin.
Joseph, round 17.
I'm going to go with Charlie's pick for my upset. I like Daniel Jones.
Danny Dimes. Come on, Joe.
Obviously, as Giants fans, he and I are both aware of the struggles, but at the same time, we're the people who remember this is a guy who threw 24 touchdowns in 12 starts when he had competent play calling. So if you give him the best offensive line, hopefully best offensive line he's had, hopefully the best weapons he's had. If by some miracle,
the best weapons he's had.
By some miracle, they can stay on the field together.
Well, that's fair.
Because that never happens for some reason. I mean, I like the upside, and he's got Matt Ryan as his other quarterback. That's just this really solid floor guy. So I think you got to just go max upside. I like the Daniel Jones pick. Worst pick, there's a chance if he recovers really quickly from his injury, I'll look really dumb. But I got to go with Odell Beckham right now. I mean, that's an injury he suffered or aggravated. I guess he said he got hurt a little bit earlier, but I mean, in the Super Bowl. So I'm not optimistic we're going to see much Odell Beckham this year. So I would have gone somewhere else.
All right, real quickly before I do the 18th round, I just want to give Nate a shout out for going straight Scarface and going F you, F you, F you. You're cool. F you. For anybody who's seen Half Baked, of course, that movie's a little old now. But so for week 18, I've got Ryan Tannehill. That was Joe. That was your pick, right?
It was.
It was the one pick in that round that's going to be used for sure. Like, there is no doubt you're going to get probably 4 or 5 weeks out of Tannehill, who I know I like to make fun of, how bad he is at times. But, I mean, Tannehill's won us money, Joe, in DraftKings. So anybody that, if you do that, you're okay with me. And again, even in late rounds, you still needed, to Nate's point, get guys that are going to get you points. It's great to have these people that, if this happens and that happens, it's also great to just have guys that are going to play and be able to score points for you. So I like that pick. And then, I mean, I'm a huge Falcons fan. I love Julio Jones. He's one of my favorite Atlanta athletes of all time, but he's not even on a roster right now. So again, especially for a guy who didn't even look like he had anything left in Tennessee last year, that's a little bit of a puzzling pick. All right, do we even need to go over who won the freaking draft? Because damn Zach with his stupid Chalupa Batman avatar. I mean, I guess it's fair to say, right? Is there any other team that we really like?
I'm gonna say your team, Keith. I really like all the guys that you have. I think you have a lot of win now guys with Jefferson, Williams, Herbert, McLaurin, just all the way down. I think your team is pretty solid in terms of like best ball or.
I knew it was a good idea to have Charlie on the podcast, Joe. He's a smart guy.
That's right.
I got you.
Nate, there any other teams you like?
No, I mean, I think everybody did a good job considering what we were working with as far as some of the auto picks might have helped improve.
True.
But even with yours, Keith, the one thing too is win now. But if this was a dynasty league,
I'd feel really good.
Yeah, your dynasty form would be even more impressive. But Zach's team was definitely good. I don't think the one thing about Charlie's team that I like is that top heavy on so many, like Jonathan Taylor, number 1 running back overall, and is, if I had to project, Kyle Pitts is either 1 or 2 tight end. Mike Evans, I have maybe as my 1 or 2 receiver with the ceiling plays, and just sprinkle in upside plays besides that stupid Ken Walker pick. And it's just just joking. Ken Walker's going to be, I do not hate Ken Walker, I promise. But no, just a good draft. I think that it's going to be good to have on the site for people to kind of peruse and look at and use as a good tool for draft season. And
just real quickly, because we've given Zach so many kudos, his team could also blow up in his face.
Oh, yeah.
Granted, it's a
Those
best
first 2
ball
picks
team. I mean, not just the first 2 picks. I mean, he's got, he's got a ton of guys. Trey Lance, who knows what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, Burrow, I think, is pretty safe, and like they added Mills, but he's got so many guys with injury concerns. So, but to the point, in a best ball draft, you can either, be ultra aggressive. You can try to play it a little bit more smooth. But I mean, I think we all agree that if everything, 90% of his lineup went his way, Zach's team is going to be just unreal. So let's end it there, though, because we went over time. But real quickly, is there anything, I will start with you, Nate, that you want to plug?
I mean, just, the work at Fantasy and Frames. Obviously, for years now, we've tried to cater to the every fantasy player, to the guy who's never played a day in his life, to the person who's played for 40 years. And I think that we do a good mix of both. Teach you how to play, give you the old adage that give a man a fishing pole and he'll eat for forever type thing. And I think that's the key that you guys all do a great job of doing as well, is digestible content. And I can't be happier with the work that you guys are all doing and the product that we're pushing out.
We appreciate it. Charlie?
I mean, it's going to start the same way. I want to shout out a bunch of the content in Fantasy and Frames. We do great work over there. I'm starting to ramp up a lot of work that I want to start doing, so I'm going to pump out a lot of content. I know everyone else is too. I also want to plug a couple of my Twitter accounts. I have my own Twitter account. It's at Charlie the Third, and for some reason, I have a Twitter account for my Dynasty team that I have with my buddies in my league. It's at the Sheen Regime DF. So if you want to follow that, I'm going to post content during the season about my team, stuff like that. Just something fun to do. So follow me on Twitter and keep reading our articles. Keep checking out our stuff on our content.
Do you have Ken Walker on that Dynasty
Yeah, so I was
team?
about to ask. I was like, man, Nate is going to bombard your Twitter if Kenneth Walker's on that roster.
Oh, no, he's not. I promise you, he's not on that roster.
That's really where I was going, Nate. I love it. Joe?
Just to piggyback on everyone else, just all the Fantasy and Frames content. I mean, the Dynasty stuff that Charlie and the rest of the guys are pushing out right now is crazy. The amount of information you have there, which can apply to any sort of fantasy, like read that stuff up, consume it. And then I just also want to throw out, I made all my picks while at work, sneaking them in between checking people into a weed dispensary. So yeah, I don't think I had any worse picks. So I'm really proud of myself. That's it.
And Joe won't mail me anything. I mean, what a jerk. I just want to thank sincerely both Charlie and Nate for coming on here. We always are happy to have other guys from the Fantasy and Frames family on the podcast because I say it every week, but I mean it. The website is unreal. It is nerdvana for fantasy football fans. I mean, whatever you were looking for, Dynasty, redraft, IDP, DFS, best ball, you name it, we have it all. It's all really well thought out stuff. So be sure to follow the Fantasy and Frames Twitter page. We'd appreciate if you followed ours, the Daily Fix Pod, and obviously follow all the different Fantasy and Frames podcasts in the podcast network. And for Keith, Joe, special guests, Charlie and Nate, this has been the Daily Fix Pod on the Fantasy and Frames Podcast Network. Thanks, everybody.
Cheers.